The unexpected reunion. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of Mount Sinai Hospital, casting long shadows across the polished floors of the East Wing. Doctor. Abigail Carter stood before the bathroom mirror, her trembling fingers adjusting the collar of her designer blouse one last time. 20 years of building her reputation as Boston's premier cardiologist hadn't prepared her for this moment, becoming a patient in her new hospital, with him as her doctor. Her phone buzzed with another message from her assistant back in Boston. Something about patient files that needed signing. But Abigail couldn't focus. The name on her patient folder kept drawing her eyes back. Ethan Brooks, Chief of Neurosurgery. The universe, it seemed, had a cruel sense of humor. The mandatory physical for her new position had seemed routine when she scheduled it. Now, standing in the private examination room, the weight of 2 decades of memories threatened to crush her. She remembered their last morning together as if it were yesterday. The smell of coffee in their shared apartment, his sleepy smile, the promise ring on her finger that she'd later mailed back without a note. Abigail forced herself to breathe slowly, using the same technique she taught her cardiac patients. The irony wasn't lost on her. A cardiologist with a racing heart. She began to unbutton her blouse, each movement deliberate, controlled. The silk whispered against her skin as she folded it carefully, placing it on the chair along with her pencil skirt. The hospital gown felt thin and inadequate, a far cry from her usual armor of designer suits and surgical scrubs. She caught her reflection in the examination room's mirror. At 45, she'd aged well. Regular yoga and a disciplined lifestyle had kept her figure trim, her dark skin glowing. The few strands of silver in her hair only added to her distinguished appearance. Yet, standing here, she felt as vulnerable as a medical student again. A knock at the door made her jump. Miss Carter, his voice, deeper than she remembered but unmistakably his, sent a shiver down her spine. I'm Dr. Brooks. I'll be conducting your physical today. Abigail closed her eyes, steadying herself. Come in, she managed, her voice surprisingly steady. The door opened, and time seemed to stop. Ethan stood in the doorway, clipboard in hand, the years having carved distinguished lines around his eyes and silver at his temples. But those eyes, those intense dark eyes that had once seen into her soul, hadn't changed at all. The clipboard slipped from his fingers, clattering to the floor in the sudden silence. Abigail. Her name on his lips was barely a whisper. She watched as a cascade of emotions crossed his face. Shock, recognition, and something else, something that made her heart skip a beat. The professional mask he'd worn slipped for just a moment, revealing the man she'd once known so well. Hello, Ethan, she said softly, acutely aware of the thin hospital gown, of how it clung to her curves in the morning light. I suppose Boston General didn't forward my medical records after all. He bent to retrieve the clipboard, using the moment to compose himself. When he straightened, his professional demeanor was back in place, but his hands weren't quite steady as he flipped through her chart. He cleared his throat. I can have another doctor perform your physical if you'd prefer. No, Abigail said, more quickly than she intended. We're both professionals. It's been 20 years, Ethan. We can handle this. He nodded, but his eyes lingered on her face a moment too long. Very well. Please have a seat on the examination table. The paper crinkled beneath her as she sat, the sound unnaturally loud in the charged atmosphere. Ethan moved closer, the subtle scent of his cologne. Still the same after all these years, making her pulse quicken. I'll need to check your heart rate and blood pressure first, he said, his voice carefully neutral. But as he placed the stethoscope against her chest, she felt his hand tremble slightly. The cool metal against her skin made her inhale sharply. Through the stethoscope, Ethan could hear her heart racing, betraying her composed exterior. He moved the instrument slowly, professionally, but the touch felt like electricity coursing through her body. Your heart rate is elevated, he murmured, still listening. White coat syndrome. She attempted humor, but her voice came out breathier than intended. You're a doctor, Abigail. You don't get white coat syndrome. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, the professional pretense cracked. The examination continued, each moment a delicate dance between past and present. When he checked her lymph nodes, his fingers brushing against her neck, she couldn't suppress a small shiver. his hands stilled for a fraction of a second before continuing their clinical assessment. "You've done well for yourself," he said as he made notes on her chart. "Chief of Cardiology at Boston General. I read your paper on innovative approaches to minimally invasive cardiac procedures." "And you," she replied, watching him write. "Your research on neurovascular regeneration is groundbreaking." "I followed your work on," she trailed off, realizing what she'd admitted. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You followed my work?" "Professional interest," she said quickly. But they both knew it was more than that. The rest of the examination proceeded with careful precision, but every touch held echoes of their past. When he tested her reflexes, she remembered how those hands had once traced patterns on her skin. When he checked her eyes, she recalled how those same eyes had once looked at her with pure love. "Almost finished," he said, his voice slightly hoarse. "I just need to check your back." The gown gaped open as she turned, revealing the smooth expanse of her back. She heard his sharp intake of breath and knew he'd seen it, the small scar near her shoulder blade from their med school days when they'd gone hiking and she'd slipped. He'd carried her 2 miles back to their car. His fingers traced the professional path of a medical examination, but they both felt the weight of memory in each touch. The small tattoo at the base of her spine, a caduceus she'd gotten their final year of med school, was still there, a permanent reminder of dreams they'd once shared. "You kept it," he said softly, his professional demeanor slipping again. "Some things," she whispered, "are harder to remove than others." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken words. Ethan stepped back, clearing his throat. "Everything seems to be in order, Dr. Carter. You're in excellent health." She turned back to face him, catching the flash of emotion in his eyes before he looked down at his notes. "Thank you, Dr. Brooks." "Abigail," he started, then stopped, running a hand through his silver-streaked hair. "The neurosurgery department has been looking for a cardiology consultant. Your expertise would be invaluable if you're interested." The offer hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility. Abigail knew she should decline, should run back to Boston and the safe, ordered life she'd built there, but something perhaps the same, something that had drawn them together all those years ago made her nod. "I'll have my assistant send over my credentials," she said softly. Ethan's hand was on the door handle when he paused. "It's good to see you, Abigail." "You're still," he stopped, professional propriety warring with 20 years of regret. "Still what?" she whispered. "Still beautiful," he said quietly, and was gone before she could respond. Abigail sat in the suddenly empty room, her heart thundering in her chest. Through the window, she could see the New York skyline, so different from Boston's familiar silhouette. Change was coming, as inevitable as the tide. And for the first time in 20 years, she was ready to let it sweep her away. She began to dress, each movement deliberate, trying to ignore how her hands shook as she buttoned her blouse. Her phone buzzed again, Boston calling her back to her carefully constructed life, but as she smoothed her skirt and checked her appearance one final time, she knew everything had already changed. The woman who walked out of that examination room wasn't the same one who had entered it. 20 years of carefully maintained distance had crumbled in the space of 30 minutes, and somewhere beneath the professional veneer they'd both hidden behind, old embers had begun to glow. Mount Sinai's halls stretched before her, promising new beginnings or fresh heartbreak. She wasn't sure which. But as she heard Ethan's voice down the corridor, discussing a case with another doctor, she knew one thing with certainty. Running away wasn't an option this time. Whatever this was, whatever it might become, she would stay and face it. After all, some hearts take the scenic route home. Chapter 2. Echoes of Yesterday. The following week passed in a blur of orientation meetings and administrative paperwork as Abigail settled into her new role at Mount Sinai. She'd accepted the position as cardiology consultant to the neurosurgery department, telling herself it was purely professional advancement, but every morning as she walked through the hospital's marble lobby, her heart quickened at the possibility of seeing him. Today was different. Her first official consultation with Ethan's department loomed ahead, and she'd spent an extra hour getting ready, her fingers trembling slightly as she applied her signature red lipstick. The woman in the mirror looked polished, professional Louboutin heels, tailored charcoal suit, pearl earrings that caught the morning light, but underneath that careful exterior, She felt like that young medical student again, about to present her first case. The memory hit her as she rode the elevator to the neurosurgery floor. Their first meeting in the medical library, both reaching for the same worn copy of Harrison's Principles of Internal Medicine. His fingers had brushed hers, and she'd felt that same electric current that still sparked between them 20 years later. The elevator doors opened, and there he was, as if her memories had conjured him. Ethan stood at the nurse's station, his white coat draped casually over his broad shoulders, silver hair catching the fluorescent light. He was reviewing a patient file, his brow furrowed in concentration, the same expression he'd worn during their late-night study sessions. "Dr. Carter," he said, looking up as she approached, his voice professional but his eyes lingering on her face. "Thank you for coming up to discuss the Thompson case." "Of course, Dr. Brooks," she replied, equally formal. They were both acutely aware of the nurses watching their interaction with poorly concealed interest. He led her to his office, and the familiar scent of his cologne wrapped around her like a memory. The space was exactly what she would have expected, meticulously organized, walls lined with medical texts and framed achievements. But there, half hidden behind a stack of journals, she spotted something that made her breath catch. A small framed photo of their graduating class, the two of them standing close together, young and in love, and unaware of what lay ahead. Ethan followed her gaze and quickly moved to his desk, shuffling papers. "The Thompson case is complex," he said, his voice slightly rough. "The tumor is pressing on both the cardiac and neural pathways." Abigail forced herself to focus on the medical charts he spread before her, but her mind kept drifting to another set of papers they'd once pored over together. Their residency applications, planning futures that were supposed to intertwine. "The cardiac involvement is significant," she noted. Leaning closer to examine an image, her hair brushed his shoulder, and she felt him tense beside her. The subtle movement brought another memory crashing back. Studying anatomy together, his fingers tracing the paths of veins and arteries on her skin, turning medical knowledge into intimacy. "What would you recommend?" His voice was low, professional, but she could hear the undertone of something else, something that had nothing to do with medicine. She straightened, putting careful distance between them. "We'll need to monitor the cardiac function closely during surgery." I'd suggest she launched into a detailed medical explanation, falling back on years of expertise to mask her turbulent emotions. Ethan nodded, making notes, but his pen stilled when she reached across him for a file. The sleeve of her blazer rode up slightly, revealing the delicate bracelet she still wore, a gift from him during their second year of medical school, a tiny silver caduceus charm catching the light. "You kept it," he said softly, all pretense of professional distance momentarily forgotten. Abigail touched the bracelet unconsciously. "It reminded me why I became a doctor." The air between them grew thick with unspoken words. Through the office window, they could see the busy hospital corridor, staff rushing past, lives continuing as normal, while their carefully constructed worlds shifted on their axes. "Do you remember?" Ethan said suddenly, his voice barely above a whisper. "The night we got our first cardiac case? You were so excited you couldn't sleep. We spent hours in the library reviewing every possible complication." Abigail's throat tightened. "You brought coffee at midnight and pastries from that little bakery on 3rd Street. You had powdered sugar on your nose." He smiled, the memory softening his features. "You were beautiful even then, surrounded by medical texts, your hair falling out of that messy bun." Their eyes met, and for a moment, the years between them dissolved. He was still the brilliant, passionate medical student who had stolen her heart, and she was still the ambitious young woman who had believed in forever. A knock at the door shattered the moment. "Dr. Brooks," a nurse peered in. "Your next patient is ready." Reality crashed back. They were no longer those young students. They were accomplished doctors, professionals with responsibilities and reputations to maintain. "Thank you for your consultation, Dr. Carter," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the emotion she could see in his eyes. "I'll have the surgical schedule sent to your office." Abigail gathered her files, her hands trembling slightly. "Of course. Please let me know if you need anything else." She walked to the door, her heels clicking against the polished floor. At the threshold, she paused, unable to resist looking back. Ethan stood by his desk, his posture rigid, watching her with an intensity that made her heart race. "The bakery," she said softly. "It's still there on 3rd Street. His eyes widened slightly, understanding the invitation hidden in her words. "They still make those chocolate croissants you loved." "Some things," she whispered, "never change." She left before he could respond, her heart thundering in her chest. In the elevator, she pressed a hand against the cool metal wall, steadying herself. 20 years of carefully maintained distance was crumbling, and she wasn't sure whether to be terrified or exhilarated. The day continued, filled with patient consultations and administrative meetings, but her mind kept drifting back to Ethan's office, to the look in his eyes when he'd seen her bracelet. Every time she glanced at her wrist, the tiny caduceus seemed to wink at her, a reminder of promises made and broken. That evening, as she gathered her things to leave, her phone buzzed with a message, an unknown number, but she knew who it was before she opened it. "They close at 9. The croissants are still best when they're warm." Abigail stared at the message, her finger hovering over the reply button. Outside her office window, the New York sky was painted in shades of purple and gold, the city coming alive with evening light. She thought of her empty apartment, of the carefully ordered life she'd built in Boston, of all the reasons she should delete the message and maintain professional boundaries. Instead, she found herself typing, "Some things are worth waiting for." His reply came instantly. 20 years is a long time to wait for a croissant. She smiled despite herself. Good things take time to prove themselves, like cardiac surgeons who become even more beautiful with time. Her breath caught. How did he still have this effect on her after all these years? She was about to reply when another message came through. "I'm sorry." That was unprofessional. Abigail closed her eyes, remembering how he used to apologize for his impulsive compliments during their residency, always worried about crossing lines. Some things really didn't change. "Professional is overrated after hours," she typed back, then added, "The bakery, 20 minutes." She changed in her office bathroom, trading her formal suit for the more casual outfit she kept for emergencies, a silk blouse and tailored pants that made her feel both comfortable and confident. As she reapplied her lipstick, she studied her reflection. The woman in the mirror looked younger somehow, touched by the kind of anticipation she hadn't felt in years. The elevator ride to the lobby felt eternal, each floor bringing a new memory. Their first kiss in the stairwell between the cardiac and neurology departments, late-night consultations that turned into deeper conversations. The way he used to look at her across crowded lecture halls, as if she were the only person in the world. The New York evening wrapped around her like a warm embrace as she stepped outside. The street was alive with energy, people rushing home or out to dinner, living their lives unaware that her world was tilting on its axis. She saw him before he saw her, standing outside the bakery, still in his hospital clothes but without the white coat, looking more vulnerable somehow. He was staring at his phone, probably wondering if she would actually come, and the sight made her heart ache with a mixture of regret and hope. Then he looked up, and their eyes met across the crowded street. 20 years fell away in an instant, and Abigail knew with sudden clarity that some things were worth risking everything for. The light turned green, and she stepped off the curb, walking toward her past and possibly her future, the tiny caduceus on her wrist catching the last rays of sunlight like a promise finally kept. "You came," he said simply when she reached him, his voice carrying all the weight of their shared history. "Some things," she replied softly, "are impossible to resist, even after 20 years. The bakery door chimed as they entered together, the warm scent of fresh pastries wrapping around them like a memory made real, and somewhere in the space between professional courtesy and personal history, between what was lost and what might be found, a new chapter began to write itself. Chapter 3. New Beginnings. The morning after their bakery reunion, Mount Sinai's halls felt different to Abigail. Every corner held the possibility of running into Ethan, every moment charged with newfound energy. She'd barely slept, replaying their conversation over warm croissants and memories that stretched across 2 decades. Her new office in the cardiology wing still smelled of fresh paint and possibility. Through the wide windows, Manhattan's skyline stretched endlessly, so different from her familiar Boston view. As she arranged her medical texts and certificates, her fingers lingered on the frame containing her first published research paper, the one Ethan had helped her perfect during those long nights in medical school. A knock at her door made her heart skip, but instead of Ethan, it was his head nurse, Laura, with a stack of files. "Doctor, Brooks asked me to bring these over. He has 3 complex cases requiring cardiac consultation this week." Abigail accepted the files, noting Ethan's familiar handwriting in the margins. Even his notations were the same, precise, thoughtful, with those little arrows he used to connect related symptoms. Some habits never changed. She spent the morning reviewing the cases, each one more challenging than the last. Ethan had always been drawn to the impossible cases, the ones other surgeons deemed too risky. In that way, too, he hadn't changed. The intercom buzzed. "Doctor Carter, they need you in OR3. Dr. Brooks's surgery has complications." She was moving before the message finished, her heels clicking rapidly against the polished floor. The familiar surge of adrenaline coursed through her veins, but this time mixed with something else. Personal concern that she tried to push aside. The operating room was organized chaos when she entered. Ethan stood at the patient's head, his surgical mask hiding his expression, but she could read tension in his shoulders. Through the glass observation window, residents watched intently, learning how masters handled complications. "Talk to me," she said, slipping into her professional role as she checked the cardiac monitors. "Pressure's dropping," Ethan replied, his voice steady despite the stress. "We need to stabilize before I can continue with tumor removal." They worked in seamless synchronization, as if the years apart had never happened. She anticipated his moves. He responded to her suggestions without question. It was like a dance they'd never forgotten the steps to. "BP's stabilizing," she announced after several tense minutes. "You can proceed." Their eyes met over their surgical masks, and that electric current passed between them again. For a moment, they were residents again, proving themselves in their first major surgery together. The rest of the operation proceeded smoothly. As they scrubbed out afterward, the silence between them was comfortable, filled with shared satisfaction of a job well done. "Thank you," Ethan said quietly, watching water sluice over his hands. "I couldn't have finished without you." "You would have found a way," she replied. "You always do." He turned to face her, water dripping from his forearms. "Having you here," he started, then stopped as the door opened. A striking woman in a white coat entered, her presence immediately commanding attention. "Ethan, I heard about the complications. Is everything?" She paused, noticing Abigail. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. Dr. Olivia Grant," Ethan introduced. "Meet Dr. Abigail Carter, our new cardiology consultant." Olivia's smile was warm and professional. "So you're the famous Dr. Carter." "Ethan was thrilled when you accepted the position." Her hand rested casually on Ethan's arm as she spoke, the gesture speaking of long familiarity. Abigail felt something cold settle in her stomach. Of course, 20 years was a long time. She'd been naive to think Dr. Grant is our head of pediatric neurology, Ethan explained. "We've worked together on several groundbreaking procedures. 5 years of collaboration," Olivia added, her smile brightening. "Ethan's brilliant insights have revolutionized our approach to pediatric cases." The way she looked at him, the easy intimacy of their interaction, Abigail recognized it all too well. Hadn't she once looked at Ethan that same way? "I should check on my other patients," Abigail said, keeping her voice professionally neutral. "It was nice meeting you, Dr. Grant." She left before either could respond, her composure cracking only when she reached her office. Stupid, she thought, pressing her forehead against the cool window glass. Stupid, to think 20 years hadn't changed everything. Her phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. "I'm sorry about dinner again. Breakfast tomorrow?" She stared at the screen, remembering Olivia's casual touch, the way Ethan had smiled at her. "Can't tonight," she typed back. "Rain check." The response came quickly. "Everything okay?" No, she wanted to write. Nothing was okay. Instead, she replied, "Just busy settling in. Maybe next week." The afternoon dragged, filled with patient consultations and administrative meetings. Every time her office door opened, her heart jumped, but Ethan didn't appear. She told herself she was relieved. Evening found her alone in her office, pretending to review files while actually watching the city lights emerge. A soft knock made her turn. "I brought coffee," Ethan said from the doorway, holding 2 cups. "You still take it with vanilla." The fact that he remembered made her heart ache. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to." He set 1 cup on her desk. "You've been avoiding me." "I've been busy," she corrected, not meeting his eyes. "Abigail." Just her name, but the way he said it made her look up. What changed between last night and today? She wanted to tell him nothing had changed, that she was just being professional. Instead, she heard herself ask, "How long have you and Dr. Grant been together?" Ethan's expression shifted from concern to confusion, then understanding dawned. "Olivia and I aren't together. She's a colleague, nothing more. The way she looks at you is the way a friend looks at a friend," he finished. "Nothing more." "Ethan." He moved closer, his presence filling her office like it once had filled her heart. "Do you know why I never married Abigail?" She shook her head, not trusting her voice. "Because every woman I met, I compared to you, and they all fell short." The confession hung in the air between them, heavy with 20 years of regret and possibility. "I should have fought harder," he continued softly. "Should have followed you to Boston. Should have." "We were young," she interrupted, "ambitious. Maybe we needed the time to become who we are now." He reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek so lightly she might have imagined it. "And who are we now?" The question echoed in the space between them, full of possibility and danger. Through her office window, the city sparkled like scattered stars, reminding her of nights they'd spent dreaming of futures just like this. "We're 2 people," she said carefully, "with 20 years of life between who we were and who we are. That's a lot of space to bridge." "Then let's start building," he replied simply. "Have dinner with me tomorrow. Not to discuss cases, just dinner." She should say no, should maintain professional boundaries, should protect her heart from hopes that had been crushed before. Instead, she found herself nodding. His smile, the one that had always been just for her, lit up his face. 8 o'clock? 8 o'clock? She agreed. After he left, Abigail sat in her darkening office, the coffee cooling, forgotten on her desk. Through the wall, she could hear the hospital's nighttime rhythms, nurses changing shifts, monitors beeping, life continuing its endless cycle. Her phone buzzed with a message from Ethan. "In case you're wondering, I still remember your favorite restaurant in the city, too." Despite herself, she smiled. Some memories, it seemed, time couldn't erase. The night spread out before her, full of possibilities and fears. Tomorrow would bring what it would bring. But for now, in the quiet of her office, Abigail allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, some stories deserved a second chapter. She gathered her things, her movements unhurried for the first time all day. As she passed the surgical board, she noticed Ethan's name listed for tomorrow's procedures, a complex spinal surgery that would take most of the day. He'd be exhausted by dinner time, but he'd still made plans with her. The thought warmed her as she walked to her car, the night air crisp with early autumn. Above, the city's glow, a few stars managed to shine through, reminding her of nights spent stargazing on the hospital roof during their residency. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Olivia's presence in Ethan's life would need to be understood. Professional boundaries would need to be navigated, and 20 years of separate lives would need to be bridged. But tonight, driving home through the city that had unexpectedly offered her a second chance, Abigail felt something she hadn't in years, the fluttering possibility of beginning again. Her phone buzzed one last time as she parked at her apartment. "Sweet dreams, Dr. Carter. Some things are worth waiting 20 years for." She smiled in the darkness of her car, remembering the taste of chocolate croissant second chances. Tomorrow would come soon enough, but tonight, hope felt like a promise finally kept. Chapter 4. Shadows of Doubt. The anticipation of dinner with Ethan had carried Abigail through her morning rounds, but fate had other plans. A complex emergency case had forced them to reschedule, and now she found herself in the hospital's main cafeteria during lunch, her salad untouched as she watched Ethan and Olivia share an animated conversation several tables away. They sat close together, Olivia's hand occasionally touching Ethan's arm as she spoke, her perfect smile brightening her already striking features. A stack of medical journals lay between them, but their discussion seemed to move beyond professional boundaries, punctuated by shared laughter and meaningful glances. "They make a gorgeous couple, don't they?" A passing nurse commented, noticing Abigail's gaze. "Everyone's been waiting for them to make it official." Abigail's fork clattered against her plate. "They're not together," she said, more sharply than intended. The nurse gave her a knowing look. "Not officially, but 5 years working together. The way she looks at him, it's only a matter of time." The words echoed in Abigail's mind as she forced herself to look away. She remembered Ethan's words from yesterday. "Olivia and I aren't together," but seeing them now, she wondered if he was simply blind to what everyone else saw clearly. Her pager buzzed, offering a welcome escape. A patient in cardiac distress needed immediate attention. As she rose to leave, she caught Ethan looking her way, his expression unreadable. Olivia was still talking, seemingly unaware she'd lost his attention. The emergency kept Abigail occupied for hours. It was the kind of complex case she excelled at, requiring all her focus and expertise. By the time she'd stabilized the patient, evening had settled over the city, painting her office windows in shades of purple and gold. She was completing her case notes when a knock interrupted her concentration. Looking up, she found Ethan in her doorway, his surgical scrubs replaced by a crisp shirt and slacks. "I thought we could try for that dinner now," he said softly, to make up for the rain check. Before she could respond, Olivia appeared beside him, still in her white coat, but somehow looking runway ready. "Ethan, the results from the Wilson trial just came in. They're revolutionary." She paused, noticing Abigail. "Oh, I'm sorry. Am I interrupting?" "No," Abigail said quickly, gathering her papers. "I was just finishing up." "You two go ahead." "Abigail," Ethan started, but Olivia was already pulling him away, her excitement about the trial results bubbling over. "We'll discuss it over dinner," Olivia was saying. "I made reservations at that Italian place you love." Their voices faded down the hallway, leaving Abigail alone with the dying light and her growing doubts. She told herself she was being ridiculous. Ethan had made his feelings clear. But watching them together, seeing their easy familiarity, her computer chimed with a new email. The hospital's quarterly newsletter. She opened it absently, then froze. There, on the screen, was a photo of Ethan and Olivia at a medical conference, their heads bent close together over a presentation. The caption read, "Doctors Brooks and Grant, Mount Sinai's dynamic duo, revolutionizing pediatric neurosurgery." The photo captured their professional partnership perfectly. Both brilliant, attractive, clearly in sync. They looked like they belonged together in every way. Abigail closed the email, but the image stayed with her. She remembered how she and Ethan had once been that in sync, how their colleagues had once described them as the perfect medical power couple. Now he had that with someone else. Her phone buzzed with a message from Ethan. "I'm sorry about dinner again. Breakfast tomorrow?" She stared at the screen, remembering Olivia's perfectly manicured hand on his arm, the way they'd laughed together. "Early surgery tomorrow," she replied. "Another time." The response came quickly. "Are you sure everything's okay?" "No." She wanted to write. Nothing was okay. Instead, she typed, "Everything's fine. Just busy." She gathered her things, ready to escape to her apartment, but the hospital had other plans. A code blue in the cardiac wing demanded her attention, followed by an emergency consultation with the trauma team. By the time she finished, it was well past midnight. The hospital corridors were quieter now, populated only by the night shift staff. As she waited for the elevator, she heard familiar voices around the corner. "You can't keep dancing around this forever," Olivia was saying. "Everyone can see how perfect you are together." "It's complicated," Ethan replied, his voice tired. "Only because you make it complicated. Take a chance. What are you waiting for?" The elevator arrived before Abigail could hear Ethan's response. She stepped inside, her heart pounding, wondering if she'd just heard Olivia confessing her feelings and Ethan's hesitation to reciprocate. The next morning brought a new challenge. A complex case required both cardiac and neurological expertise, forcing Abigail and Ethan to work closely together. They maintained professional courtesy, but the easy warmth of recent days had vanished. BP's dropping, Abigail announced during the surgery, her eyes fixed on the monitors. "I need 10 more minutes," Ethan replied, his hands steady as he navigated delicate neural pathways. They worked in tense synchronization, their previous intimacy making the current distance more pronounced. Through the observation window, she could see Olivia watching, her expression unreadable. After the surgery, as they scrubbed out, the silence between them felt heavy with unspoken words. "Good work in there," Ethan said finally. "Just doing my job," Abigail replied, keeping her voice neutral. He turned to face her, water dripping from his hands. "What changed, Abigail? Since that night at the bakery?" "Nothing changed," she interrupted. "We're colleagues, Dr. Brooks. That's all we need to be." The formal use of his title made him flinch. "Is that really what you want?" Before she could answer, the door opened. Olivia entered, her face lighting up at the sight of Ethan. "There you are. I've been looking everywhere for you." Abigail dried her hands quickly. "Excuse me," she murmured, slipping past them. She made it halfway down the corridor before Ethan caught up with her. "Abigail, wait." She turned, maintaining professional composure despite her churning emotions. "Yes, Dr. Brooks?" "Stop that," he said softly. "Stop pretending we're just colleagues. Aren't we?" She gestured back toward the scrub room where Olivia waited. "You built a life here, Ethan, a successful partnership. I won't complicate that." "You're not complicating anything," he started, but his pager buzzed, another emergency requiring his expertise. "Go," Abigail said. "She's waiting for you." She walked away before he could respond, her heels clicking against the polished floor, each step taking her further from the future she'd briefly allowed herself to imagine. In her office, she found a delivery. A box of chocolate croissants from their bakery. The card reading simply, "Some things don't change. But things did change, she thought, staring at the pastries that now felt like a bittersweet reminder. 20 years was a long time. People moved on, built new relationships, formed new partnerships. Through her window, she could see Ethan and Olivia leaving the hospital together, their white coats catching the evening light. They walked close together, their professional synchronization extending to their very movements. Abigail's phone buzzed with another message from Ethan. "We need to talk." She watched his figure disappear into the gathering dusk before replying, "Some things are better left in the past." The croissants sat untouched on her desk, their rich scent filling her office with memories of what might have been. Outside, New York continued its eternal rhythm, unaware that within the walls of Mount Sinai, hearts were breaking all over again. As night fell, Abigail remained in her office, buried in work, trying to ignore the ache in her chest. Through her open door, she could hear the hospital's nighttime symphony. Monitors beeping, nurses chatting, life continuing despite personal dramas. Tomorrow would bring new patients, new challenges, new opportunities to prove she'd made the right choice in coming to Mount Sinai. But tonight, in the quiet of her office, she allowed herself one moment of regret for what might have been. Her phone buzzed one final time. 20 years ago, I let you walk away. I won't make that mistake again. She stared at the message until the screen went dark, wondering if some mistakes were meant to be repeated, if some hearts were better left in the past where they couldn't be broken again. Chapter 5. Misunderstandings. The autumn morning brought a chill to Mount Sinai's corridors, but Abigail barely noticed as she hurried through her rounds. 3 days had passed since the croissant delivery, each one a careful dance of professional interaction and personal avoidance with Ethan. She'd thrown herself into her work, taking on extra consultations and volunteering for complex cases that kept her too busy for uncomfortable conversations. Today's schedule was particularly packed, starting with a presentation to the hospital board about the new cardiac wing. She'd chosen her outfit carefully, a deep burgundy suit that made her feel armored, pearl earrings that caught the light as she moved, every detail designed to project confidence and competence, nothing more. The boardroom was already half full when she arrived, spreading her materials across the polished table. She was so focused on arranging her presentations that she didn't notice Ethan enter until he spoke. "Dr. Carter," his voice carried that formal tone they'd adopted lately. "I hope you don't mind. I asked Michael Reynolds to join us. His company's new cardiac monitoring systems might be perfect for the wing." Abigail looked up to find a striking man in his early 40s standing beside Ethan. Michael Reynolds wore his expensive suit with easy confidence, his warm smile reaching eyes that showed immediate interest in her. "Dr. Carter." Michael stepped forward, extending his hand. "I've read your research on minimally invasive cardiac procedures. Brilliant work." His handshake was firm, professional, but lingered just a moment longer than necessary. From the corner of her eye, Abigail saw Ethan's jaw tighten, almost imperceptibly. The presentation went smoothly, Michael offering insightful questions that showed he'd done his homework on cardiac care. When she discussed the need for state-of-the-art monitoring systems, he seamlessly integrated information about his company's latest innovations. "The precision of these systems could revolutionize post-operative care," Michael noted, his enthusiasm genuine. "I'd love to show you the technical specifications in detail, perhaps over lunch?" Before Abigail could respond, Ethan interjected. "Dr. Carter's schedule is quite full with patient care." Actually, Abigail found herself saying, lunch would be perfect. "The specifications could be crucial for our planning." Michael's smile brightened. "Excellent. I know a quiet place near the hospital." The rest of the meeting passed in a blur of budget discussions and timeline negotiations. As they gathered their materials afterward, Michael touched Abigail's elbow lightly. "Shall we say 1 o'clock?" he asked. She nodded, aware of Ethan watching their interaction with an unreadable expression. "Perfect," Michael smiled. "I look forward to it, Dr. Carter." "Abigail," she corrected, returning his smile. "If we're having lunch, you might as well use my first name." Michael's eyes warmed. "Abigail it is." As he left, Ethan lingered, shuffling papers unnecessarily. "He seems very interested in the cardiac wing," he said finally, his voice carefully neutral. "He's professional and knowledgeable," Abigail replied. "Exactly what we need for this project." "Is that all it is? Professional interest?" The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Abigail thought of Ethan and Olivia, of their easy intimacy and shared laughter. "My personal life isn't relevant to hospital business, Dr. Brooks," she said coolly. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have patients waiting." She left him standing there, her heels clicking sharply against the floor, each step a small act of defiance. She had rounds to complete before lunch, but her mind kept drifting to Michael's warm smile, to the way he'd looked at her with undisguised admiration. At 1 o'clock precisely, Michael was waiting in the hospital lobby. He'd chosen a small French bistro 2 blocks away, intimate without being romantic, perfect for a business lunch that might be something more. "I hope you don't mind," he said, as they were seated. "But I took the liberty of researching your work before the meeting. Your approach to cardiac care is revolutionary." Their conversation flowed easily, moving from medical technology to their respective backgrounds. Michael had lost his father to heart disease, which had driven his interest in cardiac care innovation. His passion for the field was evident, his knowledge impressive. "I have to admit," he said over coffee, "I'd hoped to meet you even before this project came up. Your reputation precedes you." Abigail felt herself blushing slightly. When was the last time someone had looked at her with such open appreciation? The afternoon passed quickly, their lunch extending as they discussed possibilities for the cardiac wing. Michael's ideas were innovative, his enthusiasm infectious. It was easy to forget they were supposed to be having a business meeting. When they finally returned to the hospital, Michael touched her arm lightly. "I'd like to show you our latest prototype in action. Perhaps dinner this week?" Before she could answer, she saw Ethan and Olivia walking toward them, deep in conversation. Olivia's hand rested familiarly on Ethan's arm, their heads bent close together. "Dinner would be lovely," Abigail said, perhaps a bit too loudly. "Friday?" Michael's smile was warm. "Friday it is. I'll send you the details." She was acutely aware of Ethan and Olivia passing by, of Ethan's step faltering slightly as he overheard their plans. Good, she thought fiercely. Let him see she wasn't waiting around, pining for what could have been. The rest of the afternoon was a blur of patient consultations and administrative meetings. She was reviewing charts in her office when a knock made her look up. Ethan stood in the doorway, his expression troubled. "Your husband seems very supportive of your work," he said without preamble. Abigail blinked. "Husband? Michael Reynolds," Ethan clarified. "The way he looks at you, Michael, isn't my husband," she interrupted. "We just met today." "But you're having dinner with him." "To discuss the cardiac wing," she said, though they both knew it wasn't entirely true. "Not that it's any of your concern." "Abigail, don't," she cut him off. "You have no right to question my personal life, Ethan. You made your choice." "What choice?" He looked genuinely confused. "What are you talking about?" But before she could respond, his pager buzzed. An emergency requiring immediate attention. He hesitated, clearly wanting to continue the conversation. "Go," she said softly. "Your patients need you." He left reluctantly, and Abigail sank back in her chair, emotionally exhausted. Through her window, she could see the city lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. Her phone buzzed with a message from Michael. Dinner reservations at one of the city's most exclusive restaurants. She stared at the message, remembering another restaurant, another time, when she and Ethan had been young and in love and certain about their future. Now everything was complicated by time and misunderstandings, and people like Olivia and Michael. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Ethan. "We need to talk about what you think I chose." She started to type several responses, deleting each one. Finally, she simply wrote, "Some choices don't need to be discussed. They just need to be accepted." Through her open door, she could hear Olivia's distinctive laugh from somewhere down the hall, followed by Ethan's deeper voice. The sound made her press accept on Michael's dinner invitation more firmly than necessary. The night stretched ahead, full of patient rounds and paperwork, but her mind kept drifting to Friday's dinner. Michael was everything she should want: successful, intelligent, clearly interested. He represented a chance at something new, something uncomplicated by 2 decades of history and hurt. So why did her heart still skip when she heard Ethan's voice in the hallway? Why did every glimpse of him with Olivia feel like a fresh wound? Her phone buzzed one final time. Another message from Ethan. "Some choices aren't what they seem. Don't make decisions based on assumptions." She left the message unanswered, but his words echoed in her mind as she gathered her things to leave. The hospital corridors were quieter now, the night shift settling in. As she waited for the elevator, she caught her reflection in the polished doors. Successful, accomplished Dr. Carter, who had everything under control except her heart, which still belonged to a love she thought she'd left behind 20 years ago. The elevator doors opened, and she stepped inside, pressing the button for the lobby. Tomorrow would bring new patients, new challenges, and dinner with a man who looked at her like she was something precious. But tonight, in the solitude of the descending elevator, she allowed herself to wonder if some choices were made not by action but by assumption, and if some assumptions, once examined, might prove to be entirely wrong. Chapter 6. The Kiss That Changed Everything. Friday morning dawned with the promise of autumn rain, matching Abigail's turbulent mood. Her dinner with Michael the previous evening had been perfect on paper. Excellent food, stimulating conversation, subtle flirtation that hinted at future possibilities. Yet she'd returned home feeling oddly empty, her dreams haunted by dark eyes that belonged to a different man entirely. The hospital buzzed with unusual energy. A groundbreaking pediatric neurosurgery was scheduled. Ethan and Olivia's innovative procedure that could revolutionize treatment for children with brain tumors. Abigail found herself drawn to the observation deck, telling herself it was purely professional interest. Ethan stood at the operating table, his posture radiating focused intensity. Olivia worked beside him, their movements synchronized from years of collaboration. Through the glass, Abigail could hear their voices, calm and confident, as they prepared to make history. "Remarkable, isn't it?" Michael's voice startled her. He'd appeared beside her, 2 coffee cups in hand. "I thought you might need this." Long surgery ahead. She accepted the coffee gratefully, trying to ignore how Ethan's shoulders had tensed slightly at Michael's arrival. Even through his surgical mask, she could sense his awareness of them watching. The procedure is revolutionary, Michael continued, standing close enough that his arm brushed hers. Dr. Grant's research combined with Dr. Brooks's surgical expertise, they're an incredible team. Below, Ethan and Olivia worked in perfect harmony, their hands moving with practiced precision. Watching them, Abigail remembered how she and Ethan had once moved that way, anticipating each other's needs without words. The surgery progressed, hour by hour, the tension mounting as they reached critical stages. Abigail found herself holding her breath during particularly delicate moments, her coffee growing cold and forgotten. Finally, after 6 grueling hours, success. The tumor was removed completely. The child's vital signs strong and stable. The observation deck erupted in applause as Ethan and Olivia stepped back from the table. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Olivia, still in her surgical gear, threw her arms around Ethan in an exuberant hug. "We did it!" she exclaimed, and before anyone could react, she pressed a quick, jubilant kiss to his cheek through their masks. "You're brilliant." Through the glass walls of the operating room, Abigail saw everything with crystal clarity. The kiss, the intimate embrace, the way Ethan's hands came up to Olivia's waist. She didn't stay to see more. "Abigail, wait!" Michael called after her, but she was already moving, her heels clicking rapidly against the floor as she escaped to her office. She made it inside just as the first tears threatened to fall. Stupid, she thought fiercely, pressing her palms against her eyes. Stupid to care. Stupid to hope. Stupid to think. A knock interrupted her thoughts. "Doctor." Carter, it was Michael, concern evident in his voice. "Are you all right?" She quickly composed herself, grateful for the excuse of work. "Fine," she called back. "Just reviewing some urgent files." He entered anyway, carrying the coffee she'd abandoned. "You left this," he said softly, "and I thought you might want to talk about what." She kept her voice professionally neutral, shuffling papers on her desk. "About what just happened in there." He set the coffee down and perched on the edge of her desk. "About why it upset you enough to run." "I didn't run," she protested. "I have work to do." "Abigail," his voice was gentle, "I've seen how you look at him when you think no one's watching, and how he looks at you when he thinks the same." She stared at her hands, unable to meet his knowing gaze. "It's complicated. Isn't it always?" He touched her shoulder lightly. "Want to talk about it over dinner tonight?" Before she could respond, another figure appeared in her doorway. Ethan stood there, still in his surgical scrubs, his face etched with concern and something else, something that made her heart race despite herself. "Dr. Carter," he said formally, though his eyes betrayed his emotion, "a word about the post-operative cardiac monitoring." Michael's hand squeezed her shoulder once before he stood. "I'll email you about dinner," he said quietly, nodding to Ethan as he left. The silence that followed was deafening. Abigail busied herself with her computer, refusing to look at Ethan directly. "Congratulations on the successful surgery." "Abigail, please look at me. I have patients waiting, Dr. Brooks." "What you saw in the OR was none of my business," she interrupted. "You don't owe me any explanations." "Don't I?" He moved closer, his presence filling her office like it once had filled her heart. "After everything we've been through? We haven't been through anything in 20 years, she said sharply. "What you do with Dr. Grant is your concern." "Olivia," he sounded genuinely confused, "that wasn't what you think." "It doesn't matter what I think." She stood abruptly, needing to move, to breathe. "We're colleagues, nothing more. You made that clear enough." "When did I ever make that clear?" His voice rose slightly. "If anything, I've been trying to show you exactly the opposite." "Really?" She whirled to face him. "Then why does everyone in this hospital think you and Olivia are perfect for each other? Why does every nurse, every doctor, every staff member just assume it's a matter of time?" "Because they don't know me," he said quietly. "Not like you do. Not like you did." The past tense hung between them like a physical presence. Through her window, she could see Olivia crossing the parking lot, still in her surgical scrubs, victory evident in her stride. "Go celebrate with your team," Abigail said softly. "You've earned it. Come with us," he countered. "Be part of the celebration." She shook her head. "I have dinner plans with Michael." His jaw tightened. "He seems very attentive." He is. She lifted her chin. He's also uncomplicated by 20 years of history. Is that what you want? Uncomplicated? What I want. She stopped, emotion threatening to overwhelm her. What I want doesn't matter anymore. It matters to me, he said softly. It's always mattered to me. But before she could respond, his pager buzzed. Post-operative checks needed his attention. He hesitated, clearly torn between duty and desire to continue their conversation. Go, she said. Your patient needs you. He moved to the door but paused there. This isn't finished, Abigail. We're not finished. After he left, she sank into her chair, emotionally exhausted. Her phone buzzed with a message from Michael. Dinner reservations at 8. She stared at it, remembering his gentle understanding, his uncomplicated interest. Then another message arrived from Ethan. What you saw wasn't what you think. Some things are worth explaining. Some people are worth fighting for. Through her open door, she could hear the hospital celebrating the successful surgery. Olivia's voice carrying down the corridor. Still excited. Still full of victory. And somewhere beneath all the noise, Abigail's heartbeat, an uncomfortable truth. Sometimes the most complicated path was the only one worth taking. She picked up her phone, staring at the two messages. Michael's dinner invitation and Ethan's plea for understanding. 20 years ago, she'd chosen what seemed like the simpler path. Now, standing at another crossroads, she wondered if she was brave enough to choose differently. The rain that had threatened all morning finally began to fall, painting streaks across her office window. Somewhere in the hospital, Ethan was tending to his patient. Olivia was basking in their success, and Michael was waiting for her answer about dinner. And Abigail Carter, who had spent 20 years building walls around her heart, found herself wondering if some walls were meant to be torn down, no matter how much it might hurt in the process. Chapter 7. Lonely nights. The weekend stretched before Abigail like an endless expanse of emptiness. She'd canceled her dinner with Michael, unable to pretend interest in uncomplicated possibilities when her heart was in such turmoil. Now, standing in her apartment overlooking Central Park, she watched the city lights flicker to life as dusk settled over Manhattan. Her phone lay silent on the kitchen counter, though she'd checked it countless times since yesterday's scene in the operating room. No messages from Ethan, no explanations, no arguments against her assumptions, just silence heavy with everything left unsaid. Sleep proved elusive that night, her mind replaying the image of Olivia in Ethan's arms, their shared triumph made intimate by that impulsive kiss. Around 3:00 the morning, she found herself driving to the hospital, telling herself she needed to check on post-operative patients. The night shift nurses barely glanced up as she made her way to her office, her heels echoing in the quiet corridors. But instead of stopping there, her feet carried her to the hospital roof, their old sanctuary during residency where they'd escape to stargaze and dream between grueling shifts. The door creaked open to reveal she wasn't alone. Ethan stood at the railing, still in his surgical scrubs, staring out at the city lights. He didn't turn, but she knew he'd sensed her presence. Couldn't sleep either? His voice was rough with exhaustion. Checking on patients, she lied, staying by the door. At 3:00 a.m. Now he did turn, and the sight of him silver hair tousled, eyes heavy with fatigue and something deeper made her heart ache. Some things don't change, do they? You always were a terrible liar. She moved to the railing, keeping careful distance between them. And you always could read me too well. Could I? He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it hurt. Then why do you think I'd choose anyone else when my heart has belonged to you for 20 years? The words hung in the pre-dawn air, heavy with promise and pain. Below them, the city hummed with early morning energy, unaware of the drama unfolding above. I saw you with her, Abigail said softly. The way you work together, the way she looks at you, the kiss. A celebration of success, he interrupted. Nothing more. Olivia is brilliant and dedicated. And yes, we work well together. But she's not. He stopped, looking at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. She's not you. Ethan, do you know what I see every time I close my eyes? He stepped closer, his voice dropping. That first physical exam, when you walked into my office, 20 years melted away, and suddenly I was that young resident again, completely in love with the most beautiful, brilliant woman I'd ever met. "Stop," she whispered, but her body betrayed her, swaying slightly toward him. "Why? Because it's easier to believe I've moved on? Because it's safer to keep your distance?" His hand reached for hers but stopped just short of touching. "Do you know how many nights I've stood here, remembering how we used to watch the stars? The city lights are too bright now," she said, her voice barely audible. "You can't see the stars anymore." "Some lights never dim," he replied softly. "Some stars keep shining, no matter how much time passes." A door slammed somewhere below, breaking the moment. Abigail stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself against the pre-dawn chill. "I should go," she said. "Early rounds tomorrow." Abigail. Just her name, but the way he said it made her pause. "We can't keep dancing around this forever." "There is no this," she said, more sharply than intended. "There's just two people who used to know each other, trying to work together professionally. Is that what you really believe?" Before she could answer, both their pagers buzzed. A major trauma coming in. All hands needed. Professional duty called, offering an escape from dangerous emotions. They worked side by side in the trauma bay, their personal turmoil buried beneath years of training. A car accident had left a young couple fighting for their lives, requiring both their expertise. "BP's dropping," Abigail announced, her hands steady as she worked. "We need to stabilize before I see it," Ethan replied, already moving to assist. They worked in perfect synchronization, anticipating each other's needs without words. Hours later, as dawn broke over the city, they stood in the scrub room, washing blood from their hands. The couple would live, their quick action and seamless teamwork having made the difference. "We've always been better together," Ethan said quietly, watching water swirl down the drain, in everything. Abigail dried her hands carefully, buying time to steady her voice. "That was a long time ago." Was it? Because in there just now, it felt like no time had passed at all. She turned to face him, ready to argue. But the words died in her throat. He looked exhausted, vulnerable in a way few people ever saw, and so achingly familiar that it hurt. "I have to go," she said instead. "Post-operative notes." "Run away if you need to," he said softly. "But remember this, every time you walk away, you're not just leaving me, you're leaving us, leaving what we could be." She made it to her office before the tears came, hot and unexpected. Through her window, she could see the sun rising over the city, painting the sky in shades of hope and possibility. Her phone buzzed, a message from Michael asking about rescheduling dinner. She stared at it, remembering his uncomplicated interest, his gentle understanding. It would be so easy to say yes, to choose the simpler path. But then Ethan walked past her office. His surgical scrubs changed for fresh ones, ready to face another day of saving lives. He paused briefly, their eyes meeting through the glass, and in that moment, she knew some choices weren't really choices at all. Some hearts knew their true home, even after 20 years of wandering. As morning rounds began, bringing new challenges and complications, Abigail found herself remembering their conversation on the roof. The city lights might be too bright for stargazing now, but some stars, as Ethan had said, never stopped shining. The question was whether she was brave enough to reach for them again, knowing the fall might break her completely this time. Her phone buzzed once more, another message from Ethan. "Some nights are only lonely because we choose to spend them apart." She stared at the words until they blurred, wondering if loneliness was the price of safety, or if some risks were worth taking, no matter the cost. Chapter 8. Breaking Point. Monday morning brought a case that would test both their professional expertise and personal resolve. Emily Wong, a promising young violinist, had been diagnosed with a complex brain tumor that threatened not only her life, but her ability to play. The case required both Ethan's surgical precision and Abigail's cardiac expertise, forcing them to work together despite the tension simmering between them. The preoperative consultation found them in Ethan's office, surrounded by brain scans and cardiac readings. Abigail had chosen her armor carefully that morning, a navy suit that made her feel invincible, her hair swept up in a professional twist. but her carefully constructed facade cracked when she entered his office to find him studying Emily's scans with the same intense focus she remembered from their residency days. "The tumor's location is problematic," he said without looking up. "Any pressure on these neural pathways could end her career." Abigail moved closer, studying the images. "The cardiac involvement complicates the approach. Her heart won't tolerate prolonged surgery. We need to be quick and precise." He looked at her, dark circles under his eyes suggesting he'd spent the night studying the case. "Like we used to be." The reference to their past hung in the air between them. 20 years ago, they'd been known for their perfect synchronization in the operating room, anticipating each other's needs before they arose. "Doctor Grant has experience with similar cases," Abigail said, unable to keep the edge from her voice. "Perhaps she should assist." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I need you on this one, Abigail. Your expertise, your instincts." He paused. "Your heart? My heart has nothing to do with this case. Doesn't it? Because right now, it's your heart that's standing in the way of us working together like we used to." "Don't," she warned. "This is about a patient, nothing more." "Is it? Because every time I try to get close, you throw up walls or mention Olivia, or run to Michael Reynolds. Leave Michael out of this." "Why? You've made him part of this equation." Their voices had risen, drawing attention from the hallway. Through the glass walls of Ethan's office, Abigail could see staff trying not to stare. "This is neither the time nor place," she said, gathering her files. "I'll review the cardiac data and send you my recommendations." Running away again, his voice was sharp with frustration. "You've gotten good at that over the years." She whirled to face him. "And you've gotten good at rewriting history. Tell me, in your version, did you chase after me when I left? Did you fight for us? Or did you just let me go and build a new life with someone else? Is that what you think happened?" He ran a hand through his silver hair, agitation evident in every movement. "That I just let you go? I spent months trying to reach you." "Liar," the word burst from her before she could stop it. "I called, I wrote, I tried everything. Your roommate said you'd moved on, that you were seeing someone else." "What roommate? I was living alone by then." Their argument was interrupted by a knock. Olivia stood in the doorway, concern evident on her face. "Everything okay in here?" "We can hear you down the hall." Ethan straightened, professional mask sliding back into place. "Fine. Just discussing a complicated case." "I can help," Olivia offered, moving closer to Ethan in that familiar way that made Abigail's chest tighten. "Two heads are better than one." "Three is a crowd," Abigail muttered, gathering her things. "I'll send my notes." She was halfway to her office when Ethan caught up with her, grasping her arm gently but firmly. "This isn't over." "Let go," she said quietly, aware of curious eyes watching their interaction. "Not until you hear me out." 20 years ago, Dr. Brooks, a nurse interrupted, slightly breathless, Emily Wong seizing. They ran to the patient room, personal drama forgotten in the face of medical crisis. Working together, they stabilized her condition, their movements synchronized despite their anger. "We need to operate today," Ethan announced once Emily was stable. "The tumor's growing faster than we thought." "Her heart's not strong enough," Abigail argued. "We need more time to prepare. Time is the one thing she doesn't have." Their eyes met over the patient bed, professional disagreement masking deeper conflicts. The room was crowded with medical staff, all watching the tension between their two brilliant doctors. "Your approach is too aggressive," Abigail said. "You always did think you knew best. And you never learned to trust my judgment," he shot back. "Some things really don't change." "Trust?" She laughed bitterly. "That's rich. Coming from you. What's that supposed to mean? Figure it out yourself. You're the brilliant one, aren't you? Everyone says so, especially Dr. Grant." A collective intake of breath from their audience made them both realize how public their argument had become. Ethan's face hardened into his professional mask. "My office, now." They walked in tense silence, the hospital staff parting before them like the Red Sea. As soon as his office door closed, Ethan rounded on her. "What the hell was that about?" "That was about you questioning my medical judgment." "No, that was about you letting personal feelings cloud your professional judgment." The old Abigail would never have hesitated to take necessary risks. The old Abigail trusted her surgical partner completely. The old Abigail believed in forever. She shot back. And what changed? What made you stop believing? You did. When you chose your career over us, when you let me leave without a fight, when you built this perfect life with your perfect partner. Olivia is not my partner. His voice rose in frustration. She's a colleague, nothing more. How many times do I have to say it? Actions speak louder than words, Ethan. I've seen how you are together, how everyone expects you to end up together, the brilliant surgical duo making history together. Is that what this is about? You're jealous of a professional relationship? I'm not jealous, she said, but her voice betrayed her. I'm tired. Tired of watching history repeat itself. Tired of wondering what might have been. Tired of seeing you with someone else. There is no someone else. He moved closer, his presence filling her space like it once had filled her heart. There hasn't been anyone else since you. Why do you think I never married? Why do you think I kept that old photo on my desk? Why do you think I can barely breathe when you're near me? The intensity of his words made her step back, bumping into his desk. Papers scattered, and among them, she saw something that made her heart stop. An old envelope, yellowed with age, addressed to him in her handwriting. You kept it, she whispered, reaching for the letter she'd written 20 years ago, explaining why she had to leave. I kept everything, he said softly. Every letter, every photo, every memory. Even when I thought you'd moved on, even when the pain was too much to bear, I couldn't let go. But your roommate said. I didn't have a roommate then, Abigail. I was living alone, waiting for you to come back. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Then a knock interrupted them. Olivia stood in the doorway again, holding Emily Wong's latest test results. Sorry to interrupt, but you both need to see this. The moment shattered, reality rushing back in. They had a young woman's life in their hands. Personal drama would have to wait. But as they reviewed the test results, formulating a surgical plan, something had shifted between them. The anger had transformed into something else, confusion, possibility, hope. Their eyes met over the medical charts. 2 decades of misunderstanding suddenly demanding resolution. But first, they had a life to save. We'll do it your way, Abigail said finally, looking at Emily's scans. But I'll be monitoring cardiac function every step of the way. Ethan nodded, relief evident in his features. Like old times, she agreed softly. As they prepared for surgery, both knew that more than one heart would be exposed in that operating room, and afterward, when Emily's life was secure, they would finally have to face the truth that had been waiting 20 years to be heard. The truth about a roommate who didn't exist, about letters that never arrived, about hearts that had never truly let go. The operating room beckoned, its bright lights promising clarity in more ways than one. As they scrubbed in together, their movements unconsciously mirroring each other, both knew that this surgery would change more than just their patient's life. Some operations exposed more than just anatomy, some cuts went deeper than flesh, and some healing required more than just surgical skill. As they entered the OR, ready to work together to save a young woman's dream, they carried with them not just 20 years of medical expertise, but 20 years of unspoken words, waiting for their chance to finally be heard. Chapter 9. Truth Emerges. The surgery on Emily Wong had lasted 14 hours, pushing both Ethan and Abigail to their limits. Now, in the quiet of pre-dawn, they stood together in the observation room, watching their patient's steady vital signs on the monitors. Abigail had changed from her surgical scrubs back into her clothes, but exhaustion had stripped away her usual polished appearance. Her silk blouse was slightly rumpled, her hair falling loose from its elegant twist. Yet, to Ethan, watching her in the soft light of early morning, she had never looked more beautiful. Her cardiac function is stable, Abigail noted, studying the readings. The procedure was less traumatic than we feared. We still work well together, Ethan said softly. Some things muscle memory never forgets. Before she could respond, Olivia burst into the room, still in her surgical scrubs from another case. There you both are. I've been looking everywhere. She paused, taking in their exhausted appearances and the tension between them. We need to talk, all of us. Olivia, this isn't the time, Ethan started, but she cut him off. It's exactly the time. I've watched you two dance around each other for months, both too stubborn to see what's right in front of you. She turned to Abigail. You think Ethan and I are together? That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Abigail straightened, defensiva. Your relationship is none of my business. Except it is, because there is no relationship. Olivia's voice rose in frustration. Ethan and I are colleagues and friends, nothing more. Never have been, never will be. The way you look at him is the way anyone looks at a mentor they respect, Olivia interrupted. The way you look at him, that's something else entirely. Through the observation window, they could see Michael approaching down the corridor. Olivia's face softened at the sight of him. Speaking of looks, she continued, you should know Michael isn't interested in you romantically. Abigail. He can't be, because he's my fiancé. The revelation landed like a thunderbolt in the quiet room. Abigail stared at Olivia, then at Michael as he entered, his smile brightening at the sight of his fiancée. You and Michael? Abigail's voice trailed off. Are getting married in spring, Olivia confirmed. He only visits your department so often because we're collaborating on the pediatric cardiac wing, a wedding present to me of sorts, combining my work with his company's innovations. Michael moved to Olivia's side, slipping an arm around her waist. I should have been clearer about my intentions, he said to Abigail, but watching you and Ethan, seeing how you look at each other when you think no one's watching, I couldn't bring myself to pursue something that would have been unfair to everyone involved. But the dinners, the attention, professional interest in your cardiac expertise, Michael explained. And, I admit, a desire to understand the woman Ethan's been comparing every other woman to for 20 years. Ethan made a strangled sound of protest, but Olivia wasn't finished. Do you know what he keeps in his desk drawer? Your picture from medical school? Do you know why he never comes to hospital social events with dates? Because he's still in love with you. Olivia, Ethan warned, but she waved him off. No, you've both been idiots long enough. Ethan's been carrying your picture in his wallet for 20 years. Abigail. He compares every woman to you, which is why he's still single. She turned to Abigail. And you run away every time there's a chance for happiness because you're scared of being hurt again. The truth of her words filled the room like a physical presence. Through the window, they could see Emily Wong's parents arriving for early morning visiting hours, their love and concern evident in every movement. 20 years ago, Olivia continued, more gently, something went wrong. A misunderstanding about a roommate who didn't exist, about letters that never arrived. But that was then. This is now, and you're both still in love with each other, even if you're too stubborn to admit it. Michael squeezed her hand. We should give them some privacy, he said softly. I think they have a lot to discuss. After they left, silence fell heavy in the observation room. Ethan and Abigail stood, barely breathing. 20 years of misunderstandings finally laid bare between them. Is it true? Abigail asked finally. About my picture? Ethan reached for his wallet, hands slightly unsteady as he withdrew a worn photograph. There she was, 20 years younger, smiling up at the camera with all the hope and dreams of youth. I never could let go, he said softly. Every woman I met, I compared to you, and they all fell short. But your roommate said I lived alone then, Abigail. After you left for your fellowship, I couldn't bear to have anyone else in that space, our space. She sank into a chair, the weight of 2 decades of misunderstanding suddenly too heavy to bear. Then who told me you'd moved on? Who said you were seeing someone else? I don't know. Ethan moved closer, kneeling beside her chair. But I never moved on. I never could. Through the window, dawn was breaking over the city, painting the sky in shades of new beginnings. Emily Wong's vital signs beeped steadily on the monitors, a rhythm like a heartbeat marking time. I kept everything, Ethan continued softly. Every letter you sent before that last one, every photo, every memory. Even that old anatomy textbook we used to study from. The one with coffee stains on page 394. A smile tugged at her lips, despite the tears threatening to fall. And your notes in the margins, correcting the author's mistakes. He reached for her hand. Hope making him brave. I never stopped loving you, Abigail. Not for a single day in 20 years. She looked at their joined hands, remembering how perfectly they'd fit together in surgery just hours ago. "I tried to stop loving you," she admitted. "I dated other doctors, tried to build a new life in Boston, but none of them were you." "And none of them were you," he echoed. "Not Olivia, not anyone. There's only ever been you." The morning sun streamed through the windows now, catching the silver in his hair, illuminating the love and hope in his eyes. 20 years melted away in that moment, leaving only truth in its wake. "What do we do now?" she whispered. "Now," he said softly, "we stop running. We stop letting ghosts of the past keep us from what we both want. Unless," he hesitated, "unless I'm reading this wrong, unless you don't want." She silenced him with a finger to his lips. 20 years is a long time to want something and be afraid to reach for it. "Then reach for it now," he breathed. "Reach for me." Their first kiss in 2 decades was gentle, tentative, like testing uncertain ground. But the second was deeper, 20 years of longing and love pouring into a single moment of connection. When they finally parted, both breathing heavily, the world seemed to have shifted on its axis. Through the window, they could see Olivia and Michael walking away, hand in hand, their own love, a testament to possibilities. "We have a lot to talk about," Abigail said softly, 20 years of misunderstandings to unravel. "We have time," Ethan replied, helping her to her feet. "All the time in the world." As if in agreement, Emily Wong's monitors beeped steadily, a rhythm like a promise of healing and hope. Outside, New York was awakening to a new day, unaware that within the walls of Mount Sinai, 2 hearts had finally found their way home. Michael and Olivia's revelation had torn down the walls of misunderstanding, but it was up to Ethan and Abigail to build something new in their place, something stronger, something tested by time and trial, something worth waiting 20 years for. The sun climbed higher in the sky, painting their world in shades of possibility. In the quiet of that observation room, surrounded by the steady beep of monitors and the warm light of dawn, 2 hearts that had never truly been apart began to beat in sync once more. Chapter 10. The Confrontation. The evening after Olivia's revelation found Ethan and Abigail in his office, surrounded by the ghosts of their past. Ethan had retrieved a box from his home during a brief break between surgeries, a time capsule of their shared history that he'd kept hidden away for 20 years. Abigail sat on the leather couch, holding a stack of her old letters, each one carefully preserved. Her hands trembled slightly as she recognized her younger self in the passionate scrawl, the dreams and hopes they'd once shared spilling across yellowed pages. "You kept them all," she whispered, touching the pages gently. "Every single one." Ethan sat beside her, close enough to feel her warmth but not quite touching. "Even the last one. The one where you said goodbye." He pulled out a particular envelope, more worn than the others, as if it had been opened and read countless times. "I never understood this one. You wrote about someone telling you I'd moved on, that I was seeing someone else. But Abigail, I was alone, waiting for you." She took the letter, her own words from 2 decades ago staring back at her. "I called our old apartment," she said softly. "A man answered, said he was your roommate. He told me you were out with your new girlfriend, that you'd moved on months ago." Ethan's face darkened. "What man? I lived alone after you left for your fellowship. I couldn't bear to have anyone else in our space." He said his name was Nathan. The memory still had the power to hurt. "He seemed to know details about our life together, about your schedule at the hospital." "Nathan?" Ethan stood abruptly, pacing the office. "The only Nathan I knew then was—" He stopped, realization dawning. "Nathan Ellis, the resident who was competing with me for the neurosurgery fellowship." Abigail's eyes widened. "The one who always seemed to be around when we were discussing our plans. He must have overheard us talking." Ethan ran a hand through his silver hair, agitation evident in every movement. "About your fellowship in Boston, about how we planned to make it work long distance. He got the fellowship at Mass General instead." Abigail finished, the pieces finally falling into place. "He showed up there a few months later, tried to ask me out. When I refused, he already knew we were over." Ethan said bitterly, "because he'd engineered it." The truth of their past lay scattered between them like the letters on the couch, a carefully orchestrated separation designed to push them apart when they were most vulnerable. "I wrote to you every day that first month," Abigail said, her voice breaking slightly. "When no replies came, I thought, I never got them." Ethan knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "I called the hospital in Boston so many times, but they said you were always in surgery, always unavailable." Nathan was on the rotation scheduling committee. She realized he would have known my schedule, known when to say I was unavailable. "I even flew to Boston," Ethan admitted, "but when I got to the hospital, someone told me you were on a date with another doctor. I couldn't bear to stay and watch you move on." Tears slipped down Abigail's cheeks. "All these years, thinking you'd chosen your career over us." "Never," he said fiercely. "You were everything to me. Still are." He reached up, brushing away her tears with gentle fingers. The touch sparked electricity between them, 20 years of longing concentrated in a single moment. "What happens now?" she whispered. "Now," he said softly, "we stop letting the past dictate our future. We stop running from what we both want." "And what do we want, Ethan?" Instead of answering, he kissed her. Unlike their earlier kiss in the observation room, this one held no hesitation. This was 20 years of love and longing poured into a single moment of connection. When they finally parted, both breathing heavily, the world seemed to have shifted on its axis. Through the office windows, they could see the hospital continuing its eternal rhythm, unaware that within these walls, two hearts were finally finding their way home. "I never stopped loving you," Ethan said softly, his forehead resting against hers, "even when I thought you'd moved on, even when the pain was almost unbearable. I couldn't stop. I tried to stop," Abigail admitted. "I dated other doctors, tried to build a new life, but none of them were you. None of them ever could be." He pulled back slightly, studying her face in the soft evening light. "Stay with me tonight," he said quietly, not for anything but to talk, to make up for 20 years of silence. She hesitated only a moment before nodding. "We have a lot of catching up to do." They gathered the letters carefully, each one a piece of their shared history now made clear by truth. As they left his office, Ethan's hand found hers naturally, as if no time had passed at all. The night spread before them, full of promise and possibility. 20 years of misunderstandings had been stripped away, leaving only truth in their wake. And in that truth, they found not just their past but their future. Above, the city stars began to emerge, visible now through the gathering dusk. Some loves, like some stars, never truly fade. They just wait for the right moment to shine again. Chapter 11. Healing Hearts. Dawn found them in Ethan's penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park, where they'd spent the night talking, crying, and healing 20 years of wounds. They'd barely slept, too caught up in rediscovering each other, in sharing the stories of their time apart. Abigail stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the sun paint the city in shades of gold. She'd borrowed one of Ethan's shirts, the soft fabric falling to mid-thigh, her feet bare against the polished hardwood. Behind her, she could hear him in the kitchen, the familiar sounds of coffee brewing bringing a sense of déjà vu so strong it made her heart ache. "Still take it with vanilla?" he called out, and she smiled at how easily they'd fallen back into old patterns. "Some things never change," she replied, turning to watch him move through the kitchen with practiced ease. He'd changed into casual clothes, jeans, and a soft gray sweater that made him look more approachable than his usual surgical attire. The morning light caught the silver in his hair, and Abigail found herself thinking he was more handsome now than he'd been 20 years ago. "I called the hospital," he said, bringing her coffee, "told them we're taking a personal day." She accepted the cup, their fingers brushing in a way that sent electricity through her body. "What about Emily Wong's post-op care?" "Olivia's covering." She insisted. He smiled. "Said if we didn't take time to sort things out, she'd lock us in a supply closet until we did." The mention of Olivia brought no pain now, no jealousy, only gratitude for the woman who'd helped bring them back together. "We should have listened to her weeks ago," Abigail admitted, sipping her perfectly prepared coffee. "Could have saved ourselves a lot of heartache." "Maybe we needed the time," Ethan said softly, moving closer, "needed to understand what we almost lost before we could appreciate what we might have again." She set her coffee down, turning to face him fully. In the morning light, she could see every line time had carved in his face, each one making him more distinguished, more real. What do we have, Ethan? After 20 years, after all the misunderstandings, what are we to each other now? Instead of answering immediately, he reached for her hand, his thumb tracing patterns on her palm that made her shiver. What do you want us to be? I want. She hesitated, then decided. Truth was the only way forward. I want everything we dreamed of. 20 years ago. I want mornings like this, quiet moments between surgeries, someone to come home to who understands both the triumph and tragedy of what we do. I want that too, he said softly. I want to wake up beside you, to share coffee and conversation, to build the life we should have had. But, no buts. He pulled her closer, one hand cupping her face, just a promise that this time, we don't let anything come between us. No misunderstandings, no assumptions, no running away. She leaned into his touch, 20 years of longing making her voice shake. I'm tired of running. Their kiss was gentle at first, morning light warming their skin as they rediscovered each other, but quickly it deepened, 2 decades of desire flooding through them. When they finally parted, both breathing heavily, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. Stay with me, he whispered. Not just today, but every day. Move in with me. Ethan. She pulled back slightly, surprised by the sudden proposal. I know it seems fast, he continued quickly, but haven't we wasted enough time? 20 years, Abigail. 20 years of empty apartments and lonely nights when we could have had this. She looked around his apartment, noting how it felt more like a hotel than a home, like her own place in Boston had been, technically perfect, but lacking warmth, lacking life. What about my practice in Boston, she asked, but they both knew she was already considering it. Mount Sinai would be lucky to have you permanently. The cardiology department head is retiring next year. He smiled. And I happen to know the chief of surgery is quite impressed with your work. Mixing business with pleasure, Dr. Brooks? Always. Dr. Carter. He pulled her close again. Say yes. Say you'll stay. The city stretched out below them. Central Park, a green jewel in the morning light. New York had never felt like home before, but standing here in Ethan's arms, she could imagine building a life here. Yes, she whispered against his lips. Yes to staying, yes to us, yes to everything. Their kiss this time was deeper, full of promise and possibility. When they finally separated, both slightly breathless, Ethan's eyes held a mixture of joy and mischief. You know, he said softly, we never did properly celebrate Emily Wong's successful surgery. And how would you suggest we celebrate, Dr. Brooks? His answer came in the form of another kiss, this one leading them toward his bedroom. The morning light followed them, painting their reunion in shades of gold and promise. Later, much later, they lay tangled in his sheets, Abigail's head resting on Ethan's chest as he traced patterns on her bare shoulder. We should call Olivia, she murmured sleepily. Thank her for covering our patients. Already done, he replied, pressing a kiss to her hair. She said, and I quote, finally, now maybe we can all get some work done without the sexual tension filling every operating room. End. Abigail laughed, the sound freer than it had been in years. She's not wrong. We were rather obvious, weren't we? Apparently everyone knew except us. His fingers continued their gentle exploration of her skin. Michael said he knew from the first time he saw us together that there was no point pursuing you. His loss is your gain. My gain indeed. Ethan's voice grew serious. I won't waste this second chance, Abigail. I promise you that. She propped herself up on one elbow, studying his face in the late morning light. Neither will I. No more running, no more assumptions, no more letting others come between us. Speaking of others, she hesitated. Whatever happened to Nathan Ellis? Ethan's expression darkened slightly. Last I heard, he lost his medical license. Ethics violations at Mass General. Karma, Abigail murmured, settling back against his chest, though in a way, we should thank him. Thank him? For 20 years of separation? For making us appreciate this moment more. She pressed a kiss to his chest, right over his heart. For making us understand what we almost lost. His arms tightened around her. Still, if I ever see him again, you'll do nothing, she interrupted. Because he's in the past, and we're focused on the future. The future stretched before them, full of possibility. Their phones would soon buzz with hospital emergencies. Patients would need their attention, and life would resume its normal rhythm. But now they would face it together, 20 years wiser and more certain than ever of what they wanted. "I love you," Ethan said softly, the words filling the quiet room. "I never stopped loving you. Not for a single day, in 20 years. "I love you too," she replied, the words feeling both familiar and new. "Always have, always will." Outside, New York continued its eternal dance, unaware that within this apartment overlooking Central Park, two hearts had finally found their way home. Some loves, they were learning, were worth waiting for. Some hearts needed time apart to understand how perfectly they fit together. And some stories, like theirs, needed 20 years to find their way to the perfect ending, or perhaps, they thought as they drifted off in each other's arms, not an ending at all, but rather a new beginning. Chapter 12. Coming Full Circle. 2 months after their reconciliation, the day before their wedding, Ethan surprised Abigail with a private moment in their special place. The hospital roof where they'd spent countless nights during their residency. He'd transformed the space into a romantic haven with thousands of twinkling lights and white roses everywhere. "What's all this?" she asked, breathless at the sight. "I wanted one last private moment," he explained, pulling her close. "Tomorrow we share our joy with everyone. But tonight is just for us." He led her to a small table set for two, champagne chilling in an ice bucket. "Remember our last night as residents? We had dinner up here, planning our future. You brought Chinese food from that little place on 3rd Street, she smiled, touching the familiar takeout containers. "You remembered." "I remember everything about us," he whispered, pulling out her chair. "Every moment, every dream, every plan we made." They shared dinner under the stars, talking about everything and nothing, their hands constantly touching as if afraid to lose contact. When soft music began playing their song from 20 years ago, Ethan pulled her to her feet for a dance. "Getting sentimental, Doctor." "Brooks?" she teased, melting into his arms. "Always, for you," he murmured against her hair. "I have something for you." He pulled out a small velvet box. Inside lay his grandmother's diamond earrings, which she'd made him promise to give only to his true love. She knew, even back then, that you were the one. Tears sparkled in Abigail's eyes as he fastened them to her ears. "They're beautiful. Not as beautiful as you'll be tomorrow," he said softly. "Though you might want to save your tears. Tomorrow is going to be emotional enough." The next morning dawned clear and perfect. Mount Sinai's chapel had been transformed into a romantic wonderland. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, dripping with white orchids and roses. The aisle was carpeted with rose petals, and thousands of candles created a warm, intimate glow. In the bridal chamber, Abigail stood before a full-length mirror, her heart racing with joy. Her wedding dress was a masterpiece of romance and elegance, ivory silk that seemed to float around her, hand-beaded with tiny crystals that caught the light with every movement. The off-shoulder neckline showcased her grandmother's pearl necklace, now paired with Ethan's grandmother's earrings. The back dipped low, revealing the small scar from their hiking accident, a memory Ethan had traced tenderly the night before. Olivia arranged the cathedral-length veil, securing it with vintage pearl clips. "Something borrowed," she smiled. "My grandmother wore these when she married my grandfather. 60 years, and still in love." "Like we'll be," Abigail whispered, touching the clips gently. Emily Wong arrived with her violin, stopping in awe at the sight of Abigail. "Dr. Carter, you look like an angel." In the groom's room, Ethan couldn't stop moving, his nervous energy palpable. Michael watched his friend with amusement as Ethan checked his pocket for the 100th time, ensuring the special wedding gift was still there. A golden charm for Abigail's bracelet, a tiny hourglass inscribed with their initials and "Forever starts today." What if she changes her mind? Ethan asked suddenly. What if 20 years is too long to bridge? Michael gripped his shoulders firmly. "Ethan, that woman has loved you for 2 decades. Nothing could keep her from you today. The way she looks at you, that's the kind of love people write stories about." The chapel filled with their closest friends and hospital family. The nurses who'd watched their love story unfold sat dabbing at tears already. Fellow doctors who'd witnessed their journey exchanged knowing smiles. Even the usually stoic Dr. Thompson looked emotional. When Emily Wong's violin began to play, the atmosphere turned magical, but when the doors opened and Abigail appeared, time itself seemed to stop. She was a vision of pure love and grace, but it was her smile that brought Ethan to his knees, radiant, tender, full of promises for their future. As she walked toward him, their eyes locked and held, speaking volumes without words. 20 years of separation dissolved in that gaze, leaving only love in its wake. Their vows were deeply personal and moving. I, Ethan Daniel Brooks, take you, Abigail Carter, as my wife, my heart's true north, my surgical partner in every operation life bring. 20 years ago, I let time and circumstance separate us. Today, I vow that nothing will ever come between us again. You are my morning coffee and midnight consultations, my brilliant colleague and beautiful soulmate. I promise to love you through every case, every crisis, every triumph and challenge. You are my heart's rhythm, and I will keep time with you forever. I promise to cherish every moment, every smile, every touch, to love you more with each passing day. To be your strength when you need support, your comfort when you need peace. Your partner in all things. You are my past, my present, and my future. And I will spend the rest of my life showing you just how much you mean to me. Tears sparkled on Abigail's lashes as she responded, I, Abigail Carter, take you, Ethan Daniel Brooks, as my husband, my heart's home, my partner in all of life's procedures. 20 years taught me that true love never dies. It only grows stronger with each passing day. I vow to never run from our love again, to face every challenge by your side, to share every joy and sorrow. You are my stability in chaos, my peace in storms, my brilliant surgeon and beloved soulmate. I promise to love you through every diagnosis, every treatment, every moment of our lives together, to be your support, your comfort, your safe harbor in any storm, to cherish every morning we wake together, every quiet moment between surgeries, every shared triumph and challenge. You are my dream come true, my miracle, my forever love, and I will spend eternity showing you just how deeply you are loved. Their first kiss as husband and wife was both passionate and tender, sealing promises 20 years in the making. The chapel erupted in cheers and applause, but they were lost in their own world of love and joy. The reception in the hospital's grand conservatory was a perfect blend of elegance and personal touches. Crystal chandeliers draped with orchids cast romantic light over the celebrations. Their first dance was magical, Emily Wong's violin adding an ethereal quality to their special song. As they moved together, Ethan held Abigail close, breathing in her familiar vanilla scent. Happy? He whispered against her hair. Beyond words, she replied, then pulled back with a mysterious smile, though there is something that might make this day even more perfect. What could be more perfect than this? Her eyes sparkled with joy as she guided his hand to rest against her still flat stomach. Our love created a miracle. I'm 6 weeks along. Ethan's eyes widened in wonder, his hand trembling against her abdomen. A baby. Our baby. Her answering kiss was so passionate, their guests broke into fresh applause. When they parted, both breathing heavily, Ethan pressed his forehead to hers. I love you, he whispered. But both of you. So much. We love you too, she replied, her voice thick with emotion. As evening fell, the conservatory glowed with thousands of tiny lights, like stars. Ethan and Abigail stood wrapped in each other's arms, watching their friends and family celebrate. No regrets? He asked softly, about the time we lost. No. She turned in his arms, reaching up to trace his beloved face. Those years made us who we are. They taught us to cherish every moment, every touch, every breath together. Then here's to our forever, he smiled, pulling her close, to mornings and nights, to quiet moments and grand adventures, to building the life we always dreamed of. To our love story, she whispered, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. Above them, through the conservatory's glass ceiling, stars began to appear, the same stars they'd watched as young residents, the same stars that had witnessed their separation and reunion. But now, these stars shone on a new beginning. A love stronger for having been tested by time. A future brighter for being built on understanding and truth. A happiness deeper for having known sorrow. As they danced beneath the starlight, lost in each other's eyes, both knew with absolute certainty that some stories were worth waiting for. Some hearts needed time to find their perfect rhythm, and some loves, like theirs, were destined to last beyond forever. In the quiet moments of their perfect day, they shared soft kisses and gentle touches, each one a promise of the life they would build together. Their love story, 20 years in the making, had finally found its perfect beginning